So yo, I just wanted to share this fun little thing that I experienced today that I thought about. Like, I didn't expect to make a YouTube video this fast because I just put one out yesterday. But since, you know, I'm kind of a spontaneous person sometimes, I just wanted to share this real quick. Like, imagine if you like drive home, right? And it's pouring, like crazy, stupid rain. And you do not want to walk out in that weather, right? Imagine that. And so you park on your block, and your apartment's like probably about 50 meters away, like half a football field. And you don't want to get out of the car, and so you decide to wait. And then you look around, and it's like the windows look kind of cool, and these colors are kind of cool, and these shapes, and because there's water kind of streaming down the windows, and there's interesting buildings outside, and there's a flag, and there's apartments, and there's poles, you know, and power lines and stuff like that. And of course, you have your camera with you, because I know people watching this channel probably always carry their cameras with them. Like, I never go anywhere without my camera. And so I pulled out my camera, and I thought, this is a good time to let people know that sometimes, and actually in my case, oftentimes, autofocus is your enemy. I know for me, it's definitely my enemy sometimes, because in a situation like this, I wanted to get some cool shots, like really artistic shots. You know, I wanted to like create images that almost look like paintings, you know? And, you know, no crazy color grading or anything like that. I shot in log, and, you know, I just created enough contrast and tried to expose everything properly. And I knew that if I shot through this water that was dripping down, this rain, this kind of half snowy, sleety kind of thing, that I would be able to create some images that look really cool. But I also knew that I did not want to just like, you know, depend upon autofocus. I mean, I never do that anyway, but I just thought this would be a good example to say autofocus in a situation like this would be your enemy. Because if you manually focus, if you intend upon what you want to focus on in the frame, then you could kind of imagine what you want to happen around that. And so sometimes I manually focused on the actual water dripping down the glass, and then sometimes I focused on like the rear view mirror, you know, the side view mirror, and the cars going across, or maybe a car going across in front of me, like the headlights, you know, or maybe I focused on a building, or the front door of somebody's apartment, or a church, a sign, you know, a fence, a flag. But I had to manually focus through the water, which was interesting, because the water creates like a prism sometimes, and it kind of takes things in and out of focus, you know, like I'm using manual focus right now. So if I get too close, I'm going to be out of focus. If I get too far away, I'm going to be out of focus. And I'm shooting at 3.5, so I have a little bit more room than you would generally have. It's kind of like if you're working with an ASPC camera, it would be like the equivalent of 2.0, probably 1.8 maybe. 3.5 on a full frame, which is what this is, my Panasonic S5, and so that's my whole point. Everybody's always complaining about the autofocus on the Panasonic S5, which actually I think it works really well. But if you don't like the way it works, if you're not happy with it, you gotta really think about like, what situations are you really gonna rely upon autofocus other than maybe YouTube videos? Now, I use autofocus a lot on my S5, and it works flawlessly. But, you know, if you're somebody who's not happy with it, if you're like running around all over the place while you're doing YouTube videos, then you probably need a Sony or a Canon camera. But do you really? Like, is that what you do? I mean, certainly autofocus is an amazing tool, and it can be extremely convenient to get things done at times. But I think it's also really, really, really important and of great value to really learn how to manually focus, to really understand what that means and how it works, and the nuances and the control that you have over the image. Because when you're autofocusing, you don't really have any control over anything. You know, you're just like saying, okay, camera, do your thing. Sony, you badass. You know, like you could do this, but you're not really being a part of the process. You're just like touching your screen and hoping the camera chooses what you touched, you know, and you're hoping somebody doesn't like run across this frame, or some bird doesn't come behind what you're focusing on, or whatever. Like, you're really relying upon the camera to have an actual like human brain, or maybe an you know, like AI kind of brain, you know, artificial intelligence. I mean, manual focus, to me, you're much more part of the process, kind of like driving a clutch. So I'm not dogging, you know, autofocus. I think it's amazing. I think it's great. And I'm a huge fan of Sony cameras for sure. I mean, I learned on the Sony a6400. I love that camera, even though I'm probably going to sell it when I finish this project, because as far as I'm concerned, I am so extremely pleased with this Panasonic S5. But I just thought anyway that this was a good time to be spontaneous and get here and do this while I'm still thinking about it. And so maybe I won't put this video out today. I'll wait a couple of days because I just put one out. But I just thought this was a really good example of when you're in a certain situation or a scenario and you want to do something and you want the opportunity to really be creative. This is where autofocus could destroy that, you know, because I actually think, and you know, I don't want to be saying anything negative about autofocus or other cameras, but I think if you relied upon autofocus for this kind of situation, it would be kind of a lazy thing, you know, like you're not willing to be part of the process. You're not willing to get in there and make the decisions yourself. You just kind of want to see what the camera can do. And granted, you know, if you had a Sony FX30 or an A7S3 or an FX3 or an FX6 or FX9, or if you have a Canon or whatever, if you have an Arri Alexa, if you have any amazing camera, well, I shouldn't say the Arri Alexa because it doesn't have autofocus. So if you have an amazing autofocus camera, it's going to do some amazing things for you. But I think a lot of those are going to be like, wow, it's not what I really intended upon, but that is awesome. Okay, that's cool. But really, you're going to do that all the time? I mean, personally, I do narrative work, like narrative filmmaker. You know, I create stories. I want to be intentional about what I'm shooting. And so, manual focus, it's really important. And in the case of today, and you know, I've been sharing some of the stuff that I did today, you know, you might think it looks like nothing, but for me it was an interesting, you know, kind of thing to do, you know, like a practice, you know, a game, whatever, some fun, something interesting, and some really, really great work. And I mean work, like rehearsal kind of work, like training, like getting your chops together to become a better filmmaker. You know, autofocus is not going to make you a better filmmaker. I mean, the thing that's going to make you a better filmmaker is storytelling. But the other thing that's going to make you a better filmmaker is really mastering your instrument, getting involved in the camera, learning all the settings, and learning how to intentionally focus on the subject that you want to focus on in your frame so that you can communicate your story successfully to your audience with, again, intention, on purpose, the way you want to do it. Autofocus, the brain in your camera, is not your brain, and it's not nearly as smart as you. And so I would highly recommend to get involved in manual focus. It's fun, and I think you'll probably be much happier when you get in there and then use autofocus when you need to, when it's convenient, when it's it can save you sometimes. There's no question. Autofocus can save you sometimes, but it can also definitely be your enemy.
Some time to figure out just what I want. I told you I'm much I feel you. I'm asking for just a little more time. Give me some time to figure out just what I'm